My name is Jason, and I know I got into the wrong tent that night. It was late. Long after the fire had died down, and I had just woken up needing to use the bathroom. The woods around our campsite were eerily quiet, and the only light came from the dim embers of the fire and the pale glow of the moon above. I unzipped my tent, stepped out into the cold air, and made my way toward the trees. When I came back, I crawled into my tent as quietly as possible, careful not to wake up my friend, Mark, who had been snoring just minutes before. But the moment I settled in, something felt wrong. The air was colder inside. The fabric of the sleeping bag wasn't mine. And then breathing, not Mark's, not slow, rhythmic snores, but shallow, ragged breathing. I froze. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I could make out a figure lying beside me, facing away, motionless. A wave of confusion and fear washed over me. I wasn't in my tent. The figure twitched. I bolted upright, heart hammering. "Mark," I whispered. But as I reached out, the figure sat up. I didn't see its face. I didn't need to, because the thing beside me moved wrong, its spine too stiff, its movements unnatural. And then, it turned. I scrambled backward, shoving myself toward the tent flap. My fingers fumbled with the zipper, shaking violently. Behind me, I heard a voice that sounded like mine, but wasn't. "You're in the wrong tent." I ripped open the flap and tumbled out, gasping. My real tent was a few feet away, untouched, the zipper still closed. Without hesitation, I stumbled toward it, throwing myself inside and yanking the zipper shut behind me. Mark stirred awake. "Dude, what the hell?" I couldn't speak. I couldn't explain. My body trembled as I listened, but there was nothing. No footsteps. No movement from the other tent. The next morning, I worked up the nerve to check. There was no other tent. My name is Ethan, and I should have never swum in that lake. It was supposed to be a perfect summer camping trip. Just me and my friends, spending a weekend by the water, enjoying the fresh air. The lake was beautiful, stretching endlessly, its surface calm and inviting. We set up our tents near the shore, planning to spend the days swimming and fishing. But then, something happened. Something none of us can explain. It started on the first afternoon. As I floated on my back, staring at the sky, I felt something brush against my leg. I jolted upright, scanning the water, but there was nothing. Probably just seaweed, I told myself. But the feeling of something slithering past my skin sent a chill up my spine. Then Matt screamed. We turned to see him flailing in the water, eyes wide with terror. Something grabbed me. He gasped, kicking toward shore. We rushed to help him out, but when he stood on the sand, his leg was bleeding. 3 long, thin scratches trailed down his calf. "Did you hit a rock?" Sarah asked, voice shaky. Matt shook his head. "No, it pulled me." None of us knew what to say. There was nothing in the lake big enough to scratch like that. We tried to shake it off, but the uneasy feeling lingered. That night, as we sat around the fire, the lake was eerily still. No ripples, no gentle waves lapping the shore. Just a smooth, glassy surface reflecting the moonlight. Then we saw the shape. A figure stood in the water, not on the shore, and the water waist deep, completely still. It was too far to make out details, but we could see its outline against the moonlit lake. "Who the hell is that?" Ryan whispered. No one answered. None of us moved. Then, in the blink of an eye, it disappeared beneath the surface. A heavy silence fell over us. My skin prickled. The lake had been calm. There were no ripples, no sound of splashing. Just gone. We didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the lake looked normal again, as if nothing had ever been there. But Matt refused to go back in the water, and honestly, I didn't blame him. By noon, we decided to pack up early. As I loaded my bag into the car, I glanced back at the lake one last time, and I saw it again. A pale face just beneath the surface, staring up at me with hollow, black eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. We left without another word, and I've never gone near a lake again. My name is Emily, and I will never follow strange tracks in the woods again. We were deep in the forest, miles away from civilization, when we found them footprints in the damp earth. At first, they seemed normal, a single trail leading deeper into the trees, barefoot, slightly sunken into the mud, except something was wrong. The footprints only went one way. There were no returning tracks, no sign that whoever left them had ever turned around or come back. Just an endless path stretching into the shadows of the forest. Maybe they belonged to another camper, Adam suggested. I didn't like it. The prints were fresh, too fresh. Whoever made them should have still been nearby, but the woods were silent, too silent. We should head back, I muttered, an uneasy feeling creeping into my stomach. Come on, Em, Rachel teased, grinning. What if it leads to something cool? Maybe an old cabin, or something we shouldn't find, I cut in. But the group had already made up their minds. Against my better judgment, I followed. We walked for what felt like an hour, the footprints guiding us deeper into the trees. The farther we went, the heavier the air became. The trees grew taller, their branches twisting unnaturally, blotting out the sky. Then Adam stopped. Guys, look. We followed his gaze and felt our stomachs drop. The footprints had stopped, just like that, mid-step, as if whoever had been walking had simply vanished into thin air. No scuffle, no sign of struggles, just nothing. Rachel let out a nervous laugh. Okay, that's freaky. Maybe they climbed a tree, or she, I hissed. Something was wrong. The forest felt different. The air was too still. No wind, no rustling leaves. Even the distant sounds of birds had disappeared. Then, behind us, another set of footprints appeared. Not ahead of us, behind us, leading back, the way we had come. Guys, Adam's voice wavered. We didn't leave those. Something was following us. A twig snapped. We ran. Branches slashed at my arms as we sprinted, our only focus on getting back to camp. The air was thick, pressing against us, slowing us down. The trees seemed closer now, as if the forest itself was shifting, trapping us inside. Then, out of nowhere, the ground disappeared beneath me. I hit the dirt hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. Pain shot through my ankle. I groaned, trying to push myself up, but then I saw them more footprints. But these weren't ahead of me or behind me. They were around me, encircling me. I screamed. The others reached me, dragging me to my feet, half carrying me as we bolted back toward camp. We didn't stop, didn't look back. Not until we finally burst through the tree line. The moment we crossed into the clearing, the air changed. The weight lifted. The sounds of the forest returned as if nothing had ever happened. But the footprints didn't stop at the tree line. They stopped right at the edge of our camp, watching, waiting. My name is Daniel, and I will never forget the night the forest went completely silent. Camping was supposed to be peaceful. A weekend away with my friends, escaping the noise of the city, sitting around a fire and telling stories. And for the first night, that's exactly what it was. But on the second night, something changed. I first noticed it when I woke up in the middle of the night, my throat dry. I reached for my water bottle and paused. Something felt off. Then I realized what it was. The forest was silent, not just quiet silence. No rustling leaves, no chirping crickets, no distant hoots of owls. Even the wind had died. It was as if the entire world had been placed on mute. A creeping unease coiled around my chest. I sat up, glancing around the tent. The others were still asleep. I considered waking them, but stopped myself. Maybe it was just a weird trick of nature. Maybe the wind would pick up again, the sounds would return, and everything would be normal. Then I heard it, breathing, right outside. My tent, slow, deep, too steady. My entire body tensed. I strained my ears, trying to convince myself it was just one of my friends who had woken up and stepped outside. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't human. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate, like something pretending to breathe. Then, ever so slightly, my tent zipper moved. I stopped breathing. The zipper only moved an inch before it stopped, as if whoever or whatever was outside was testing it. A slow, dragging sound scraped against the fabric of my tent. I snapped my eyes shut, forcing myself not to make a sound. My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure it could hear me. The dragging continued, moving along the side of the tent, circling it. Slow, unhurried. Then it stopped, right at the entrance. Minutes passed, I don't know how many. Then, suddenly, a sharp rustling sound echoed from the other side of the campsite. The thing outside my tent moved fast. A series of soft, rapid footsteps, disappearing into the woods. The moment it was gone, the sounds of the forest returned all at once. The wind whistled through the trees. Crickets chirped. The distant hoot of an owl filled the air. Everything was normal again, but I knew better. Morning came, and I didn't mention what had happened. Not at first. But then, Sarah, pale and shaken, whispered, "Did anyone else hear?" Breathing last night. One by one, the others nodded. We packed up and left that morning, and as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something somewhere was still out there, listening. My name is Jake, and I still don't know who or what sat with us that night. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. 5 of us, me, Ryan, Claire, Matt, and Sarudi, decided to go camping deep in the national park, far from the noise of the city. We set up our tents, built a fire, and spent the evening laughing, roasting marshmallows, and telling stupid ghost stories. Then, at some point, we weren't alone anymore. I don't remember when he arrived. One moment, it was just the 5 of us, and the next, there was someone else sitting by the fire. A man. He was wrapped in a tattered coat, his hood pulled low over his face, staring into the flames. None of us saw him walk into camp. None of us even acknowledged his presence at first, as if he had always been there. Then Ryan noticed. "Hey, who the hell is that?" We all turned. The conversation stopped. A thick silence settled over the group. The stranger didn't move, didn't look at us, just sat there, hands folded, breathing slow and steady. Sir," Claire tried, her voice uneasy. "Are you lost?" "Nothing." Matt grabbed a flashlight and pointed it at him. "Hey, we're talking to you." The moment the beam of light hit him, my stomach twisted. His skin was wrong, grayish, weathered, almost waxy, and his eyes. I don't even know if he had eyes. Just 2 deep, dark pits where they should have been. He smiled. Not a normal smile. His lips stretched too wide, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too perfect. "It's a lovely night for a fire," he murmured. Something in his voice made my skin crawl. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Jake, let's go." We all felt eaten, overwhelming, gut-wrenching wrongness. Without another word, we stood up, backing away from the fire, from him. He just sat there, watching, grinning. We ran to our tents, zipping them shut, our breaths ragged. No one spoke. No one dared move. I lay there, heart pounding, listening. The fire crackled. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, circling our tents. I squeezed my eyes shut, my fingers digging into the fabric of my sleeping bag. The steps stopped outside my tent. I held my breath. A whisper. "Let me in." I don't remember falling asleep. But the next thing I knew, the sun was rising. Cautiously, we unzipped our tents and stepped outside. The fire had burned down 2 embers. The stranger was gone. No footprints. No sign that anyone had ever been there except us. We packed up and left immediately, not speaking of it until we were miles away. None of us could explain it. None of us wanted to. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I swear I can still hear the fire crackling and a whisper asking to come in.